Hello, and welcome to another episode of Corinne's Life. So today I have here Orion Mott. Now, Orion, would you say you're an energy healer? What is it that you do, Orion?
Well, I guess it's kind of a combination of East and West. I have a background in kinesiology, personal trainer, corrective exercise specialist, and at the same time I grew up with martial arts and Qigong and Tai Chi and energy work. So really my life has been the meshing of those two things.
Incredible. So I understand that you specialize in concussion therapy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
I had a client years ago, a personal training client, and he had a concussion, and I had just done body talk therapy, and body talk is a kind of like an osteopathic practice that I started in 2004. And I tried all the different techniques and all the tapping and breathing. Nothing had any effect. And I put my hand over his head and like, hey, let's just try this. It was just kind of this epiphany, let's just try something new. And I put my hand over his head, and I had this intense feeling in my head of this sort of cracking sensation. It was like clicking, popping. I could feel something going in my head, and he said at the same moment he felt the same thing in his head.
Oh my gosh.
And he got woo, he got this like big rush of something. He went home, called me the next day and says his concussion's gone. Now that was 2004, so this is a long time ago.
Yeah, 16 years ago.
And then years later, another person came in with concussion, like, hey, I got this thing I want to try. So I basically came at it from knowing how to do it and then trying to backtrack to figure out how I'm doing it, and that took a while.
Okay.
I call it energy neuroplasticity, which is what I'm trademarking it as, but it is basically I came up with it to begin with, and now I'm backtracking as a therapeutic practice.
This is incredible. So I've known Orion for a few years now, and you've always been into energy work. I think you grew up in a home where it was encouraged.
I'd say I was quiet about it. I wouldn't sort of advertise this is what I do, but I'm at a party, someone has a back pain, I put my hand on their back and take a couple of deep breaths, and how does it feel? And I kind of use this sort of anecdotally as that, or I had a client who hurt something, I'd be like, hey, I can go help that person. So I was always very private about it until I like literally came out of the closet and say, okay, this is what I want to do.
Amazing.
And when I decided to do that, that was the best decision of my life, to do this full time.
That's incredible. Me personally, I've seen Orion when I had concussion about 2 years ago now. And, Western therapy only took me so far, and it's still incredible what the people have done for me, but that was for, my body in terms of like whiplash, my shoulder, my arms and all that, and massage therapy and you name it, and occupational therapy. But then I noticed that I still wasn't the same person. My heart chakra was closed. And I just knew that like I wasn't able to function properly, and I wasn't able to retain information as well. And I still had light headaches and all that stuff, and it's like a foggy memory or the way I'm thinking. And so I called Orion and I said, can you help me here? And he says, of course I can. And within the first session, so what he does is you lie down on a table and he doesn't touch you. He just puts his hand close to you. Now, do you want to take it over from here in terms of like what happens?
So I'll tell you what I feel. I guess. So I was born really sensitive, which is a terrible thing as a teenager. It's a great thing as an adult, but being a sensitive kid I was crying a lot. Okay, so I was a really emotional kid because I was feeling stuff and I interpreted that as emotion. It wasn't, but I didn't have any way of classifying feeling that wasn't emotion. So when I put my hands over your head, for instance, the brain has architecture, energetic architecture. Think of it sort of like scaffolding of energy, sort of layers of electrons, floating around the protons and neutrons of the brain. And that architecture is a very uniform thing around the head. And when there's any kind of brain damage, any kind of impact, any kind of injury, trauma, there's like little divots, sort of like when you're playing golf and you hit a ball and you make a little divot. There's these little divots that I feel, and I call them the cold spots because it really feels like when I'm putting my hand over it, it's like it feels cold. And then I feel deeper and deeper. I put my awareness deeper into the brain until I find that point, and then I start bringing the consciousness outwards. And as I guess I cure that divot, everything sort of uniformly comes around and people feel better. The symptoms are gone.
So he brings the consciousness forward. So tying into, explain the pineal gland.
Well, actually, I use my brain. It's always good to use your brain. So I brought along my brain. So anyways, this is not an exact model, but this is what your brain looks like. So this is the outside, and the very center, just off the brain stem, we have, and it's not exact, this gets a little more back here, but this is called the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is fascinating. Most cultures, most sacred cultures, historically use a symbol of a bindi, or the Orthodox Jews have a little box that they use for prayers. They use almost every culture that celebrates, and the Pope wears a hat that looks like a giant pineal gland. I mean, all these cultures use this sort of pine cone symbol for so many aspects of spirituality. But anyways, the pineal gland is right here. And what I do is I get people to access that by shifting their awareness to turn it on, to use it. And they locate it and use it. As they stretch their awareness further and further out from their brain, the consciousness goes into the brain parts that are damaged and rearranges them. So people feel clicking, popping, swirling brains as these things are coming back. And it's usually on the third session people feel it the most. The first session they know something's going on, but the third one they can actually feel the sort of cracking of consciousness as the energy goes through that area and changes it.
Well, because that's exactly what happened to me. Like, there I am, I'm still in trauma, like shaking because my brain wasn't fully functioning like it once was. And I'm lying down and he puts his hands over me and he knows exactly where it was. So he didn't even want me to tell him where the damage was. He's like, I'm going to find it. Because he also wants to prove to you that this actually works, right? This actually exists. And then, so my mind would wander. I would be like, oh, puppies, rainbow and lollipops. Every time my mind wandered, he knew. And I was like, how is he doing this? How are you in my head? So how are you aware of when the patient...
the cracking stops. I feel this tickling, this crackling in my head. And when the mind wanders, it's like it stops. I'm like,
oh my God.
And I know that's not me. So I'm like, okay, wake up,
Yeah.
Because people are so close to sleep that a lot of people fall asleep. And actually, I say this, but there were some, when I was working with this NHL hockey player a little while ago, he fell asleep. And it still works. As I worked with the conscious, it's almost like he was still consciously aware even though he was asleep and snoring.
Okay.
And I could still feel that the conscious was available in that state. So this is not a waking consciousness. This is very much like hypnotism, like very that deep hypnotic state where I believe we access our body and so that hypnotic state. So as I stretch the awareness through there, that shifting of consciousness happens, but it's not a conscious self. It starts off that way, but as time goes on, it's almost like you go on automatic a little bit, and you do that. But it's not thinking about something.
Amazing.
That's a little different.
Amazing. Yeah, so the first session, after he was finished, he said, okay, get up slowly, because this spatial, what is it? The spatial
Everyone feels
relations?
drunk. Everybody feels drunk afterwards for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, and he said, like, the spatial relations is just, it's like he's bringing it together in my brain. And it's so true because right as I got up, he had these, I think it was like a Persian looking rug with all these patterns on the ground. And I was trying to step down, like this is so bizarre. And he, and he encourages you to sit down, to have some tea in the waiting area and all that. And I did until eventually I'm okay to drive. And then I think you need a good chunk of hours to sleep, right? Because the brain heals when you sleep.
Majority of people, the first session, I said to them, yours was pretty minor, but if I'm working with someone with a major concussion, I have someone drive them because they'll fall asleep at the wheel on the way home.
Wow.
That happens a lot. So I always have to sort of judge on the conversation, sort of like how bad the concussion is by asking questions. And if it's a certain level of damage, I always say, okay, have someone drive you the first 2 sessions, and the third session you're fine. But the first 2, and people sleep between 14 and 17 hours. And the way I understand this, and again, I'm backtracking this I figured it out, now I'm understanding it, is it's like the computer, when your computer freezes up and you turn it off and have to reset it. Sleep does that for the brain. As we shut off our systems, our brain can go to that deep state to do the healing work. So that kind of happens like after the fact. So like when you do a workout, the next day you get stronger.
Yeah.
So this is the healing work we do. They're a little frazzled and they go home, and over the next 3 days they get better and stronger with their brain, right? So that's kind of how it works.
That's incredible. Yeah, so then I saw him so that was like 75% improvement after the first session, and that was an hour of work, I think.
About that hour.
Yeah.
We chat, you and I, so.
Yeah, I know. We chat very easily. We chat, absolutely. And then I saw him 2 more sessions, and I just couldn't get over how quickly I was improving. Because what's really scary, and I remember you saying this, I don't know if you recall this, what's really frightening is that, so I'm a very friendly, open person, right? I'm so sociable.
You are Miss Social.
Yeah, right. I'm such a social butterfly. And so I was so concerned because my heart chakra was closed. Like I didn't know who I was anymore, and I was like, is this the new me? And so I don't know if you remember this, but so I asked you, am I going to be myself again? And he's like, yes, absolutely, you will. And I said, well, what about my heart chakra? And then you shared a story with me about this one woman who was married, and her heart chakra was
Yeah.
You want to share that?
Yeah, I think I can share that story. I work with couples and I do a lot of different interesting things if you see my website. And one particular woman she was angry at her husband, she didn't like her husband, he's a narcissist, she had all these ideas. And I asked her one question, like, do you know who he is? She goes, I know who he is, I know how he acts. And I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, I want you to put your hand on his heart, I want you to look him in the eyes, and I want you to have a conversation with him. And she talked to me later and she said it's the most profound experience of her life. For the first time, she felt him. She's heard him, she's seen him, she's smelt him. You know, they've done all these other things together. She didn't really connect with him. She didn't really connect her heart with him. And so he, as a lot of men do, pulled back his emotions to be, comfortable, I guess. And she was really kind of at him, kind of that personality. So it was a dynamic that she can really understand what she was feeling by connecting with them.
That my dog is hey, Caramel, no barking. I have my dog with me. He's with me wherever I go. Wow. So what I noticed quickly afterwards was that my heart started opening again. So how is that related? How come the heart? Is that related?
Well, so there are three core spiritual places of our body. One is the heart, and we access that. Like I said, I used to think it was emotion. It's not emotion, it's feeling. I use my heart when I meet people. I generally look them in the eyes. In the old days before COVID, I used to shake their hands, obviously, and I would feel their hearts. I would shake their hearts, and I could tell you in about 10 seconds if this person was a good person, not a good person. I could tell you so much about my comfortability with that person. If we're a mesh, I would connect my heart to their heart, and I would know instantly if this person was a person I should deal with, and I would know instantly if this was a person I had no interest in. And that level of openness, of vulnerability, by being vulnerable, I could open up the vulnerability of the hearts around me, and I could know if we actually have something in common, or if there's a past life friend of mine that I just met for the first time in my life, and I've had that too. So the heart is really important. That's one of the sacred organs. The other one is what we call the Kundalini energy. And the other one is the pineal gland. So those are the three major spiritual centers of our body, and they're really important to be developing for our relationship with ourselves.
I agree. Yeah, I'd say that's my superpower. It's like just being able to do what you do. It's not necessarily shaking of the hand, but it's just that inner knowing that I get from, I believe, spirit guides or my angels. I don't know. There's so much going on.
Your higher aspects of yourself.
Yeah, and so I can tell when someone's heart is open or not, and that's why I was so concerned when I had my concussion. I'm like, oh, it's closed, what's going on?
But I'll just tell you, with concussions, a lot of times people have this feeling of depression, and the reason why is because they're trying to have a normal thought. A normal person versus a concussion person, you'll probably can tell if I'm right or wrong, but this is generally what people tell me. A normal thinking person says they're walking down the street, they see a blue car. The blue car reminds them of their first blue car. It reminds them of their girlfriend, that time they had at the beach with the girlfriend, and the time that they broke up, and there's a sweetness and there's a sadness, and then he misses that girlfriend, and then he goes back to a normal thought. That's a normal thinking process of feeling. A concussion person says, I see the blue car, I think of the girl, they skip all the positives, they think, oh, she left me, I'm angry, and it's almost like they have 4 thoughts instead of 10 thoughts, and they don't have like a balanced emotional thinking because they can't access all their brain parts they want. They access the ones that are available, and the ones they can't, they don't access. So when people start feeling better from a concussion, it's because they're able to access all the brain parts, all the limbic areas, all the emotional centers, all the frontal cortex, and all the memory and planning. That's part of natural thought. So when any kind of injury upsets that natural process of layered thoughts.
Okay, yeah, because that's what happened to me. I hit the emotional part of the brain.
Right.
And so I didn't have that link.
Yeah.
I didn't have feeling, if you will. And who am I without feeling? What am I, a robot? I don't think so. I'm all heart. So I'm forever thankful for all that you've done. And I understand not just people with concussions come to you. You kind of tune up the elderly, so to speak.
I work with people who have the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
Because Sometimes, and it's not every time.
Right.
I've worked on family members that had this. It's the dirt in the brain. So some Alzheimer's, some brain dysfunction for the elderly, we'll just say, and we'll make it a blanket term, is that there's dirt in the brain. Their kidneys are not cleaning as well as they should. Their filtration system's not as good. Maybe their nutrition isn't good. Maybe their blood flow isn't good. And there's parts of the brain that sort of fill up with dirt, sort of like the lint trap in your dryer. And so what I do is I go into that area where there's less functionality, and it's the strangest experience. I do the same work with concussion healing, but it feels like this sort of movement in the brain. Like it feels like the experience. What someone told me, it feels like worms moving, and it was the brain just deciding to release the toxins. And that detoxification, and then suddenly the memory came back. And it's not like a treatment with concussion where it doesn't come back. For those things, it's sort of like it's good every 6 months to do a session and just rejig the brain.
Okay.
And that's what I've been doing with people. So it's not a cure, but it's a treatment that has a profound effect for the early set of these diseases. But long-term effect of these diseases, I can't do anything. I mean, obviously, there's only so much you can do. But
sure.
But again, it has a lot to do with kidney function, as I've learned, and a lot to do with the qualities of the blood and the ability for the body to move that blood properly through the brain, which is upset by a lot of toxins and stuff in our environments.
Now, what about people who aren't into this whole Eastern energy, like they need to see it to believe it? Did they try to challenge you, or are they not even in your life?
I could go a lot of stories about that.
Yeah,
where I get called out. Some lawyer calls me out, like, well, "What do you see in my body?" And I tell him openly in front of everybody what's going on with it. And he's like, "Okay, enough." Okay.
Oh, that's okay.
I won't say any names, but yeah, I've had some interesting moments where someone challenged me. I'm like, "Okay, we could do that. If you want to do it in front of everybody, I'm happy to tell you all about your stuff." But I only did it once or twice, but it was just for me, I guess, the early time of my career to like have the confidence to stand up to people. But
right.
I'm not here to challenge people. The people who come to me who want to pay the money for the work that I do are like on the edge of that cliff and they just want to jump off. And my job is just to push them off. They think they're going to go down and they fly. But I don't talk them to the edge. It's not for me to bend people's wills or change their feelings. It's not for me to change their religion or their experiences. But if people already feel open and curious and drawn to my work, we're going to work really well together. But if I've had to coax them into that, it does happen. Where a wife, I have this amazing breakthrough with the wife, and then the husband's going to come and he's like, "I don't want to do anything here." I'm like, "Well, we can sit and talk to each other," and we just sit and talk. We'll do a Reiki session or something, but we're not going to engage the problem until the moment they're ready to do that. That's just, you have to respect people's will.
So you're able to feel the energy in the brain. Now you can also tap into the body and see what's going on. That is what body talk?
That's medical intuitive. It came from body talk. Body talk is, I love body talk, and it was my first love when it came to treatments of the body other than fitness. But it's a lot of muscle testing. It's memorizing giant flow charts and muscle testing and tapping, and I still use some of the techniques that are amazing. For instance, in car accidents, when someone has that fear, every time a car screeches tires, they have that tense up feeling. Mm-hmm. Body talk is a great release for the amygdala to release the switch, that the fight or flight response. It's fantastic for that.
How does it do that? So it's not hypnotherapy.
Well,
it's like tapping into memory.
In body talk, there's a correction where you roll your eyes and you go back to the emotional memory of the impact or the injury, and we go back there and then we change. We literally reprogram the brain to go back to that, and I switch them to something really great, like being at the beach with their partner and the sun shining, and from the car accident to the sunshine is such a switch that the amygdala pops off in that negative fight or flight. And it's just, the memories stay the same, but they can have screeching tires and not have that physical reaction, like they're in that moment, because the heart is always in the now. The feelings are always in the now. The heart doesn't know past, doesn't know future. If you love, you'll always love. That's what the heart does. The heart is not bound by time like the mind is. So when you bring up an emotion, it's happening right now, even though it happened 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Right. And so that being said, though, I agree the heart is in the now, but in the now, they can have their heart blocked because of different reasons, that this did this. But even though it wants to be in the now, this is stopping it from opening the heart.
So I actually have to go into the feeling, whatever, and I don't care what abuse people have gone through. We have to go into that feeling of what's there, and the way I do is we go into the feeling and shift the heart, change our different ideas, different feelings about stuff. Mm-hmm. As you shift your heart, the mind then says, okay, well, the heart's good, I'm good. Like the mind doesn't want to control, doesn't want to manipulate, doesn't want to block it out, doesn't want to deny it. The head will always reflect what's going on in the heart. So when the heart's good, the head's good. But when the heart's not good, people go to their head, that's when the problems start.
Excellent.
We do these things because I'm going to do this because of this, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when the problems happen. Because the choices we make as humans are only based on our programming, and that's based on our experience, and those are limited. I mean, we only have so many years to learn things in our life, so we only know what we know.
Yeah, and what do we know? We need to learn a lot. So, how do people find you?
My website, orionmott.com.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll put it underneath in the description.
Yeah.
I'm also starting a YouTube channel called Activate Myself, which is going to be talking about these type of topics, but I want to engage people without trying to make them believe something. I want to engage people with some answers and ideas and tools that they can use in their life that maybe are helpful in the process of what's going on in their life. Because I get the same themes all the time. I feel blocked. I don't love my husband. I'm not connected with my body. I work in a place that's toxic, and all these things. I have a friend, and she's always draining my emotions all the time. So I take on these topics, and I talk about, here's the technique that you can use and see if that works for you. Right? So that's what we'll be doing on that channel as well.
That's brilliant, and this is how he's making this world a better place, one person at a time. And I'm just so grateful to know you, to have you in my life, and for all the help you've given me throughout the years, and just all the beautiful work that you're doing with people to make this world much brighter. So thank you so much. Thank you. You're the best. Shake hands.